While browsing the internet, you might have come across a weird eBay listing. This listing is for a pre-owned t-shirt being sold for $14,000. And no, it's not vintage Louis Vuitton or Gucci or some rare authentic Led Zeppelin concert shirt. No, this one is a butter yellow health knit beefy tee that reads, "I got bombed at Harvey, South Lake Tahoe, August 27th, 1980. And at first glance, this might look like a satirical shirt meant to parody the kind of souvenir shirts people wear saying they got drunk on spring break. But this shirt's origin story is a little more complicated than tequila shots and beer bongs, and a whole lot more exciting. That's because on the shore of beautiful Lake Tahoe, set against a mountainous backdrop, is State Line, Nevada. Sure, the name might be a little on the nose, but it's a town that attracts plenty of visitors. In the summer, people go there to lake, and yes, I'm using that as a verb, things like sunbathing on a dock or taking out the pontoon boat or go water skiing. In the winter, people snow ski and snowboard on the scenic slopes. On the west side of State Line is California, and on the east is Nevada, where, in the 1980s, gambling was legal in an era when very few states allowed for it. So all year round, people would travel to State Line to gamble on a small downtown strip that makes Reno look like Vegas. Well, on August 27th of 1980, the Wednesday before the long Labor Day weekend, the streets of downtown State Line were packed. Food vendors were hawking hot dogs, t-shirt vendors were selling items with quippy phrases, and the general public were placing bets. A whole lot of bets. Now, these bets were not on black or red, or on the full house in their hands, or on the little white balls in the Keno Lounge. They were placing bets on if the casino would explode. So, of course, we have to ask the question, did they win? Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about the Harvey's casino bombing. This is one of those really bizarre stories from the 1980s that for some reason more people don't talk about. I, like a lot of people, first heard about this case from the eBay listing mentioned in the intro. And I'm glad that I did because this entire thing is strange and I'm excited to talk about it. It's a wild story composed of, according to one FBI bomb technician, the most sophisticated bomb ever made. As a matter of fact, it's a device that was so complex, the FBI has a display model of it for reference to this day. And just as complicated was the father-son dynamic that would give Darth Vader a run for his money that led up to this instance in the first place. So if that sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we talk about the Harvey's casino bombing. Just because you're not at a casino with a bomb threat doesn't mean you won't explode, you know, in a metabolic health sense. But taking care of yourself can be difficult, especially when it's typically so time-consuming and boring. Thankfully, today's sponsor, Factor, is here to help. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals straight to your door. Meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. And not only are they good for you, but they taste good as well. Factor has over 100 rotating weekly meal options. From meals and salads to breakfast, shakes, and more, all crafted for great taste and nutrition. And you can choose from plans that make sense to you, like Calorie Smart or Keto or Protein Plus or Vegan and Veggie. You can even switch out the protein options if you'd rather have one kind of protein over another. And Factor avoids fillers like seed oils and bans over 175 ingredients, focusing on nutrient-dense foods that help support lasting energy. And there's no prep work and hardly any cleanup. So you can get something that's quick, tastes good, and doesn't come with guilt. I used to be picky about what Factor was going to send me, but at this point they can just send whatever they want. Everything I've had from them has tasted good, and when I was trying to lose weight, it didn't feel like I was sacrificing good flavor or an enjoyable meal. I'm a huge fan of Factor, and hopefully you will be too, because now is a perfect time to try it out. That's because if you head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code WENDIGANGFB50, you'll get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for a year. That's right, half off your first box and free breakfast for a year. Again, that's code WENDIGANGFB50 at factor75.com to get in on this incredible offer today. Thank you all for watching the ad. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring the channel. Their link will be in the description. We are now back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So let's set the scene. It's 8 a.m. on August 26th, 1980. You've been out late drinking the night before, maybe indulging in some cheap steak and all-you-can-eat lobster. You're probably hungover and tired. The last thing you want is to be woken up by someone banging on your door, completely disregarding the Do Not Disturb placard hanging outside of your room. But of course, someone does. So you throw on your robe, move to the door, ready to let someone have it, but when you open it, It's a policeman. Before you can even register what's happening, he's telling you to get out, that you don't have time to grab your belongings. You have to go in whatever you're wearing. You need to evacuate immediately because there's a bomb in the hotel. So you join the deluge of guests and patrons flooding into the parking lot, leaving ice melting in their drinks, their gambling chips on their trays, not knowing how much time you have to get to safety. Some people have no shoes on, some people have no clothes on, and everyone is panicking. And as you're on your way out, FBI agents, bomb technicians, and various other law enforcement are going inside. This was the scene at Harvey's Resort Hotel and Casino. A massive bomb containing 1,000 pounds of TNT disguised as an IBM copy machine had been discovered in a hallway, along with an anonymous ransom note demanding $3 million. It was so well designed that it left the country's best explosive specialists stumped, and it left both the residents and visitors of State Line riddled with anxiety. Now, that didn't mean they were going to leave. Perhaps that's what it would mean in a normal city, but as someone from a small town, no. The people descending on State Line, Nevada for the last week of summer were looking for one thing: to be entertained. They weren't about to let a bomb get in their way or, heaven forbid, go to waste. In fact, for many, it actually added to the fun. They wanted in on the action, especially as the countdown on the police two-way radio steadily ticked away from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7. But before we get there, let's talk about what led up to this explosive circumstance in the first place. Harvey's Resort Hotel and Casino was named after its founder, Harvey Gross. With his colored blazers and wide ties, he looked a lot like a used car salesman or Saul Goodman. You know, the kind who slaps the hood of the car and loves a good bargain. Despite his get-up, he was a pretty good businessman. He and his wife, Llewellyn, opened their casino in the mid-1940s. Back then, however, it was called Harvey's Wagon Wheel Saloon and Gambling Hall, because I guess that is what you would call a casino back in the 40s. And it consisted of one room with a lunch counter next to some slot machines and a blackjack table or two. Well, over the next decade, the Wagon Wheel grew to 11 floors and 197 guest rooms in addition to their large casino floor, and renamed it to the classier Harvey's Resort Hotel and Casino. It became a go-to regional destination. But nevertheless, Harvey probably never thought his little slot and sandwich joint would eventually garner national fame, or infamy. But, you know, big bombs tend to do that. Oh yeah, probably the thing you want to know about: the bomb. Even with this tranquil setting, bomb threats weren't entirely unheard of in the Tahoe area. According to FBI Special Agent and bomb technician Bill Jonke, crazy last name, during an interview for the Scamtown podcast, Tahoe would get 4 to 6 credible threats a year. Most turned out to be hoaxes or small bombs, but none of them were anything like the one Jonke would go on to investigate at Harvey's. I like the explanation there. Sometimes it's a small bomb. It's like, oh, well, yeah, someone called in a bomb threat, but it was like a hand grenade. So, you know, why did we even come out? I remember one time when I was in high school, someone called in a bomb threat, not one of the high school people, I don't think, just someone in town called in a bomb threat to the local post office. And for whatever reason, they made all of the grades get in the gymnasium and hunker down like it was a tornado drill or something. And I remember being in there and thinking to myself, wouldn't you want us to not be in one enclosed space? Because if there is someone with a lot of bombs, this would probably, you know, fix a lot of steps for him. Anyway, in the early hours of August 26th, 2 men in jumpsuits unloaded a large piece of machinery weighing close to 3,000 pounds from a white van. The cover of the device read IBM and intentionally appeared to be roughly the size and shape of a copy machine. The men rolled it across the street to Harvey's, through the parking lot, through the doors of the casino, through the cigarette smoke-filled lobby. I mean, it was the 80s after all, and even commissioned the help of a security guard to help them get it on the elevator. The 2 men ascended 1 floor before getting off and wheeling it onto the 2nd floor, where the casino offices were located. They left the device in the hallway and laid an envelope next to it addressed to the Harvey's management. It wasn't much longer before an employee found the envelope and probably asked who left a copy machine in the middle of the hallway. It struck him as a bit suspicious, and as the saying goes, if you see something, say something. So he informed Harvey's security team, who promptly called law enforcement, which rushed to the scene, sirens blaring. Which I feel like the bomber, assuming he wanted to open a dialogue with the police or the management at Harvey's, I feel like the bomber got lucky that someone actually cared to look at the letter, and it wasn't like most office spaces where some temp is annoyed and just pushes it out of the way and like throws away the letter, and then a bomb goes off and no one has any idea what happened. It was around this time in the late 70s and early 80s that letter bombs had become a trendy, high-profile crime in America. As those who have seen my main channel video will be familiar with, just a couple of years earlier, some unsuspecting victims had opened letters and packages that exploded in their faces, a few of which were later attributed to the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. So upon seeing this letter, the first responders cleared out the area, thinking the envelope was a threat. Yes, you heard that correctly. They didn't think the copy machine was a threat, they thought the letter was a threat. As Jim Sloan, a reporter for Tahoe News, describes, the cops took cover behind the large IBM copy machine to protect themselves from a small explosion as they poked at the potential letter bomb with a broomstick. I mean, they had no way of knowing, but it's funny to imagine that they were using a big bomb as a cover for a little bomb. Special Agent Jonky adds, quote, "One of the guards had a stick and he was going underneath the bomb and smashing the envelope with the letter. And when that didn't explode, I guess he felt pretty good about it." He called the police and they think there's a bomb, so they have a broom and they're just like whacking it, trying to make it go off. But when they opened the envelope and read the letter, they realized that they were actually hiding behind 1,000 pounds of nitroglycerin. Or quote, "enough TNT to severely damage Harrah's across the street." So this was the FBI's game now. Agent Jonky got the call 5 a.m. After nearly 9 years in the Bureau, he was the man for the job. On the scene, his first course of action was to read the 3-page ransom letter carefully in an attempt to discern if this copy machine bomb was a hoax or the real deal. The letter began, quote, "Stern warning to the management and bomb squad. Do not move or tilt this bomb because the mechanism controlling the detonators in it will set it off at a movement of less than 0.01 of the open-in Richter scale." And emphasis on the Richter scale, because all of this was happening near the California border. Lake Tahoe sits above 3 major fault lines. An earthquake, even a small sudden tremor, was certainly in the realm of possibility. Meaning if this was real, the bomb could go off at any moment. The letter continues, quote, "This bomb can never be dismantled or disarmed without causing an explosion, not even by the creator. Only by proper instruction can it be moved to a safe place where it can be deliberately exploded." The word creator could be interpreted as an almost God complex type of term in this context. In addition to educating himself about the bomb, Jonky was also evaluating the man behind it. From the get-go, he knew he was dealing with someone who saw themselves as a genius, or as Jonky would put it, you're looking at a very egotistical jerk, let alone a bomb maker. To show off more of his brilliance, this creator described in pseudo-engineering level detail what not to do with the bomb, using lines such as, quote, "There is a float switch and an atmospheric pressure switch set at 26 to 33, and the flathead screws are also attached to triggers, and as much as 1/4 to 3/4 of a turn will cause an explosion." The guy sounded both unhinged and highly educated, which is not a great combination when dealing with a bomb maker. Once again, insert Uncle Ted joke. Jonky knew he needed a closer look at the device. When the officials removed the IBM tarp cover, this is what they found. One small steel box sitting on top of a much larger steel box, presumably the detonator with the explosives underneath. So you had the brain and the bomb. On the side of the top box was a panel of 28 switches. A forensics team dusted for fingerprints, took photographs, listened to its insides, and x-rayed it, careful not to tip or bump it. This creator had constructed the boxes using steel plates, which made it difficult for x-rays to penetrate. But radio imaging revealed a series of complex circuitry. The boxes contained a mass so thick that investigators knew it was either explosives or, at the very least, designed to look like explosives. If this was real, it was the biggest bomb Jonky had ever seen. Quote, "I was just astounded at the size of it. It looked extremely formidable. I'd say it was a holy shit moment." The X-ray also revealed that some of the switches were reversed, meaning something labeled as off on the outside was actually in the on position. "That raises the pucker factor a little bit," added Jonky. I appreciate when highly trained FBI agents use technical language like the pucker factor, because yeah, 1,000 pounds of TNT with fake switches would be a pucker factor. What the X-rays did 100% confirm was that whoever this creator was, perhaps he did earn the right to be proud of himself and his bomb. You know, in the realm where it's okay to be proud of that sort of thing. Jonky knew disaster was a distinct possibility. The FBI had an active bomb situation on their hands. Local law enforcement mobilized. Harvey's resort hotel and casino was evacuated floor by floor, room by room, under the pretext of a serious security problem. Harvey Gross himself oversaw the evacuation to make sure it went efficiently. One hotel guest described the chaos as, quote, "No one told us where to go, what to do. It was frightening. We didn't know what to do." Nearby businesses had to be evacuated as well, including other casinos. School buses were brought in to help clear the vicinity. All of the buildings in the blast radius boarded up their doors and windows to prevent them from shattering from the blast. Both the police and fire department worked together to create a perimeter far enough away that anyone on the outside would be safe. And clearly concerned for everyone's safety, thankfully, the letter had made an extremely kind recommendation, quote, "It is our advice to cordon off a minimum of 1,200 feet radius and remove all people from that area." Well, that's very kind of the bomb maker to care about what happens to people if a bomb does what bombs do. It would almost be better if someone just didn't make it. You should tell the letter that. But with human life now taken care of, there was still the concern of money, as always. Police needed to secure the casino's assets, as this was a prime opportunity for someone to come in and steal the chips and cash while the casino was emptied out. Because the casino was open 24/7, many of the doors didn't even have locks on them. So law enforcement had to go to hardware stores to gather as much chain link and as many padlocks as they could find in order to lock the place down. Meanwhile, the bomb was completely baffling the FBI. There were more than 100 agents on the scene. The Bureau flew in the best explosive experts in the country. They had scientists on the phone, combing through studies and drumming up theories. It was like that scene in Apollo 13 when the mission control engineer dumps that box of stuff on the desk in front of all the NASA scientists and says, "Fit this into that." All of the best minds in explosives were sourced, yet the creator was besting them. Quote from Jonky once again, 8 different ways that bomb could detonate. And as a bomb technician, to defeat it, you would have to defeat all 8 firing circuits, which just could not be done. This makes the bomb sound more like a video game than an explosive device. And maybe it's coincidental, but it is interesting that most of the old classic game designs contain 8 stages or worlds, the most famous of which being Super Mario Bros. So maybe the bomb maker put 8 switches in it as a sort of joke. Of course, in this situation, if you lost, you don't get to start over. It meant you triggered one of the 8 electromechanical fusing mechanisms and completed the circuit between a battery and a detonator, therefore blowing up an entire city block and everything on it. Some of the creator safeguards for disarming the bomb included lining the small box and large box with aluminum foil, sandwiched between 2 layers of neoprene. This meant if anyone drilled through the box, the drill bit would complete a circuit. In other words, adding a 9th way for the bomb to go off. If someone removed the screws holding the boxes in place, then a spring-loaded contact would complete the circuit. If either of the box lids were removed, pressure switches would open to complete the circuit. If you tried to flood the bomb with water, then a float switch would complete the circuit. There was a pendulum made from PVC pipe also lined with aluminum foil. So if the bomb was tilted, circuit completed. Those 28 switches I mentioned, another safeguard. This one more mental than mechanical. Switching the wrong one could potentially complete the circuit, said the letter, quote, "I repeat, do not try to move, disarm, or enter this bomb. It will explode." And as the FBI was investigating, it seems that was the case. While all of this was being analyzed inside Harvey's, the scene outside had become just that, a scene. Curious onlookers, more akin to disaster tourists, joined the evacuees. It seemed like half of the town's residents came down to see what was going on. Local and state news vans set up shop to broadcast. With rumors of a nuclear bomb inside the casino, law enforcement had to ease everyone's fear that no, this is not a nuke. It's just a regular bomb filled with a lot of regular explosives, so nothing to see here. There's an old saying, everything in Nevada is legal except scaring the horses. So when people outside started drinking, a local bartender got in on the action. They created a special cocktail for such an occasion, which for any drinkers or bartenders out there is how the world ended up with the Harvey Wallbanger. 1 part vodka, 3 parts orange juice, some vanilla liqueur, shaken with ice and garnished with orange slice and cherry. And of course, because this is too obvious, because this was a gambling town at the end of the day, people were making and taking bets on if and when the casino would explode. Several hours passed. The bomb had been discovered much earlier in the day, and still the FBI still had not made much headway in disarming it. It was time to consider the ransom demand. A demand that reads as follows, quote, "We demand $3 million in used $100 bills. They must be unmarked, unbugged, and chemically untreated. If we find anything wrong with the money, we will stop all instructions for moving the bomb." Harvey Gross said this was a non-starter. First off, despite being a casino, the letter incorrectly assumed Harvey's had that much cash on hand. And the FBI historically has never liked paying ransoms due to the precedent that it sets. Since if you start telling criminals that threatening to blow up a casino can get you $3 million, that's probably a bad idea. But just like in the movies, the FBI pretending like they're going to pay the ransom is right in their playbook. Jonky tells an anecdote about the Carson City, Tahoe area FBI using this tactic. It involves the perpetrator demanding a very simple cash drop-off in a trash can on a beach. When the authorities got there, they realized the only way someone would be able to hide and watch the drop would be from the water. So the agents made the drop and waited. Not too much longer, a man in a ghillie suit emerged from the water and walked right up to the trash can, to which he was promptly arrested. Basically, allowing the perpetrator to go for their ransom money is a good way for them to get caught. Back in State Line, though, the creator's instructions for the ransom, much like his bomb, were much more elaborate and mysterious. His demand section of the letter was followed by incredibly detailed and planned instructions for delivery and conditions of the business transaction. His words, not mine. Quote, "The money is to be delivered by helicopter. The helicopter pilot is to park at 2300 hours as close as possible to the LTA building by the light at the Lake Tahoe airport. It is to face the east. The pilot has to be alone and unarmed. The pilot is to get out and stand by the chain link fence gate. He is to wait for further instructions, which will be delivered by a taxi that will be hired." All in all, the letter said the drop would involve 5 steps, but they would only know the next stop after the previous step was complete, meaning setting a trap for this guy was way more complicated than usual, as was, his bomb. While the technicians were sweating it out with the bomb, other FBI agents were cutting up bits of green paper to make a few duffel bags weigh exactly how much $3 million would weigh. Then they strategically placed $5,000 in real cash on the surface of the bag to make it look like it was full. At this point, it was now officially the next day. The bomb didn't have a timer, so they weren't running against a literal clock, but they were running against a metaphorical clock for either the next time there's a slight tremor in the region or someone moves the bomb too much. Harvey fetched his helicopter and the FBI's plan was on. But according to Jonky, this was where the creator began to slip up. Quote, "He turned out to be quite a good bomb builder, but a piss poor map maker." So again, the FBI's plan is to go along with this ransom demand and see where it gets them. But as mentioned, that's where it seems the bomb maker ran into some problems as well. On August 27th at exactly 12:05 a.m., a payphone rang for the pilot of Harvey's helicopter. He answered, wearing a wire so the rest of the FBI team could listen in, as he repeated out loud what the person on the other end of the phone was telling him. The pilot was told to look under a nearby shelf, where he found a note. The pilot read this note aloud too, and it was a series of very specific landing instructions for the next phase. Quote, "The helicopter has to be filled up with gas. Do not come armed with any weapon. Do not bring a shotgun rider. All radio channels will be monitored. You are to have no communication with anyone after you reach the airport. Do not try to be a hero. Arlington is full of them and they can't even smell the flowers. Follow the orders strictly. You will make 5 stops, none of which will be at an airfield. You will have ample lighting for landing. All sites are fairly level. One has about 2 degrees pitch. There will be a clearance of more than 200 feet radius. We don't want any trouble, but we won't run away if you bring it. Happy landing." The Arlington line goes kind of hard if this wasn't coming from a dude who's putting people's lives at risk for money. The pilot took off with an armed agent hiding in the back. This was a risky move because, as the note stated, any deviation from these conditions will leave your casino in shambles. The FBI was taking a calculated risk with this lone armed agent, but everything else in this first step was followed exactly. The pilot flew at an elevation of 500 feet in the direction he was told. He was supposed to be looking out for a strobe light that would be activated once he was upon approach. And the strobe light is where he was supposed to land. But as the pilot flew, he could not identify a strobe light anywhere. meaning the creator's plan could not be followed, which scared the FBI. It crossed their mind that maybe this was an elaborate hoax. Maybe there was no drop at all, and the endgame was a massive explosion all along. So what does the playbook say when the very explicit directions can't be followed? In this case, the pilot was ordered to return to the ground. Using the media as a form of direct communication, the governor of Nevada made a plea to the creator. Quote, Harvey's Resort Hotel is making a request that the person providing instructions make contact again to provide a clarifying message. This request is made due to failure of enlightenment and confusion in following the previous directions. It is crazy that this case got to such a point that the governor was relaying questions for the FBI to the bomb maker. Time passed. It had been 33 hours since the bomb had first been found, and still they received no response. So the FBI agreed that the best course of action was to try to disarm the bomb in the safest place possible in the event that they set it off. After consulting with Harvey's structural engineers, they determined the bomb being right where it was in the casino was the safest place. The walls of the hotel and casino could, according to engineers, withstand a blast of 1,000 pounds of TNT. The disarming attempt consisted of severing the brain of the bomb from the boom using a shaped charge. Basically, a fast enough controlled explosion might disconnect the wiring in the top box from the bottom box with all of the big explosives. Essentially, their plan was to create a small explosion near the mass of TNT in order to prevent it from being triggered. But even with all the experienced intelligence in the room, this plan was speculation at best. Especially considering, if the dude's right in the letter that the smallest movement or tilt to this thing could cause it to go off, maybe detonating a bomb on top of it would also cause it to go off. The plan was relayed to law enforcement, who then warned the businesses and the masses on the street that had gathered, eagerly awaiting this moment of truth. I mean, they had money riding on this, right? The explosive specialist created a very lengthy charge for the top box, running firing leads through an eerily empty casino and out to the outside perimeter, giving them enough distance from the hotel to remain safe should their plan fail and the bomb detonate. Blast engineers were taking sledgehammers to walls to minimize potential damage. These walls were taken down to create a more open area around the explosive to release potential pressure over the worst case scenario. Basically, if the big bomb does go off, give the explosion more room to air out. News cameras were rolling on both sides of Harvey's. Everyone cleared the building, including Jonky. A warning siren blared as police listened to the countdown on their two-way radios. 5, 4, 3, 2. The FBI had given this plan about a 25% chance it would work. And well, it didn't. Despite their best efforts, the circuit was completed and... On August 27th, 3:43 p.m., the bomb went off. Not just the FBI's controlled explosion, but the bomb went off. 1,000 pounds of TNT decimated half the floors of the hotel. Everyone in Tahoe could hear the explosion. Dust and debris went everywhere. 2x4s were flying down the street for hundreds of yards. Rivaling the sound of the blast was the roar from the crowd, who were cheering, yelling, and applauding. One official recalled of the explosion, quote, "We did have an explosion. We were attempting to render the device safe. We had a procedure we thought would work. There was some error factor in that procedure." The error factor he's referring to is the bomb exploding, which again is what happened. The whole front went out, recalled a security guard at the nearby Sahara Tahoe Hotel. The explosion ripped a 5-story hole through one side of the building, leaving cement and fixtures hanging from twisted rebar. But the hotel remained standing, and more importantly, nobody died, and miraculously, no one was hurt. The creator was not getting his handsome payday, but there were financial ramifications involved. Over $18 million in damages had been done to the hotel, which is a lot now, but even more back in 1980. Employees lost their jobs for a substantial amount of time. And after the shock and awe of the moment wore off, an entire community had to come with the terms that they had been terrorized. But they did have a cool drink named after it, so that's something, I guess. Hotel guests lost their belongings, keepsakes, money, and clothing, which is actually a large part why that t-shirt on eBay even exists. Because within the day, t-shirt makers and vendors had shirts pumped out reading, "I got bombed at Harvey's, I survived the bomb," and simply, bang. A lot of the crowd bought the cheeky slogan shirts to commemorate the event, but there were also hundreds of people who needed clothes, and the vendors were the closest and fastest way to put shirts on their backs. Although wearing something that references the bomb that was responsible for destroying their luggage probably wasn't ideal for some, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I can personally attest, although that has never happened to me and nothing close to that's ever happened to me, I feel like I would want to wear the shirt. But this case was far from over. Now, an investigation needed to be conducted. This came in two parts. First, recover and collect portions of the bomb amongst a huge mass of rubble. 5 hotel floors had fallen to the bottom of the hotel. That's a lot of debris. As pieces of the hotel were excavated, they would be placed in wheelbarrows and rolled to a team who had to sift through them using screen wires, keeping an eye out for parts of the bomb. There were 2 bags next to the sifters, one to collect the bomb parts and the other to collect the casino chips and cash to return to Harvey's. Harvey Gross had guards with shotguns placed at each sifting station to prevent anyone from trying anything funny. He also opened up a part of the casino floor that was mostly unaffected as soon as he got clearance to do so, because one of the first rules in business and politics is to never let a good crisis go to waste. And I'm sure there were a ton of people who wanted to play blackjack in the casino that just blew up. As the cleanup and recovery effort continued, Harvey put up a giant temporary window so patrons could watch as they gambled. The second part of the investigation, and probably the part that you've been thinking of this entire video, was catching the creator. This would be no easy task. No fingerprints or other human forensic evidence had been found at the scene. The FBI and local authorities created a hotline and set out a substantial $20,000 reward for any tip leading directly to the capture of the perpetrator. This was both a blessing and a curse. Calls flooded in, leaving investigators dealing with thousands of tips that, like the debris in the hotel, would have to be sifted through. The plan was to gather all of the tips and eliminate them one by one. It was a tedious task, with many of the tips being certain that someone who had absolutely nothing to do with it was the one that had done it. As Jonky said on the previously mentioned podcast, quote, Joe Schmuck the Ragman did it, so we'd have to go find Joe Schmuck the Ragman and do a background on him and find out what he was and where he was, then ultimately talk to him and eliminate him. Oftentimes you get sidetracked by these guys. After going through hundreds of dead ends and false leads, Jonky and the FBI eventually received something that seemed promising. A motel owner in South Lake Tahoe reported that 2 men checked into his establishment the night before the bomb was found. According to the motel owner, they were drunk and loud late into the night. So the owner took the license plate number of the white van they were driving. This van was big enough to transport a 2,600-pound bomb and belonged to a man named John Burgess Jr. The FBI followed up on it, but unfortunately, it became a dead end. Then a decent lead came in regarding a group just outside of Reno. The FBI had the group under surveillance for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks straight, but this just led to yet another elimination. At one point, investigators had over 400 potential suspects in their file. They would need to get creative if they wanted to catch the person who did this. And by creative, I mean hypnotism. Every single new detail of this case is as shocking and alarming as the last. That's right, the FBI were dabbling in hypnotic interviews. Man, what a time to be alive. The results were not permissible in court, but interrogators were hopeful that witnesses might remember some forgotten clue or hint or lead while under a trance, which the Bureau could then follow. As you could probably guess, they got absolutely nothing from this method, so they decided to be smart instead by appealing to the most powerful motivator and magic known to man: more money. They increased the reward to now very tempting $500,000. The reason you normally increase dollar amounts like this isn't because you expect some law-abiding citizen to see more money and decide to tell the thing that they've been holding out on till this point. It's to try to flip someone close to the case. Maybe if multiple criminals know about this bomb maker, but we're keeping quiet for $20,000, maybe $500,000 will make them rethink their allegiance. Well, as they say, money talks, and that was all it took for the tip of all tips to come through. In April of 1981, a young man called the Fresno FBI office. He knew that the FBI had been asking questions about John Burgess Jr., man with the white van who the motel owner had called the FBI about. On this call, the tipster was confident and said, quote, "Don't look at Johnny, look at his father." This young man just so happened to be dating Johnny Burge's ex-girlfriend. This ex-girlfriend knew that the elder John Burgess, or John Burgess Sr., or Big John as he liked to be called, had borrowed the van at the time of the Harvey's bombing, and that Big John was a strange man who liked to tinker with things in his garage. And she was absolutely positive that he had done it. So who was Big John, and why did he potentially build a really big bomb for a casino? Investigators looked into the tip and collectively realized that this could finally be their man. John Burgess fit the profile. He frequented Harvey's casino regularly. He knew Harvey personally because he was one of the casino's high-limit players, but he was not well liked by the employees of the casino. They found him off-putting, rude, and just overall strange. At certain points, he would actually play blackjack without ever looking at his cards, which you can do in Texas Hold'em if you're good enough, but doing it in blackjack is weird, considering the whole point of blackjack is looking at your cards and seeing if they add up to a number. If you don't look at the cards, now what are any of us doing? With all this in mind, it's no wonder that, in addition to losing substantially over the years, Big John was also $15,000 in debt to Harvey and had taken out a second $40,000 mortgage on his home to pay for it. He was also denied more credit to the casino 6 months earlier, so there we have our motive. He was a chronic gambler in debt who was denied more gambling money by the casino he frequented. So someone who knows the layout, knows where to put a bomb, knows the owner, but has a personal beef with the establishment. The FBI looked further into John Burgess Sr.'s personal background. He had immigrated from Hungary in 1956 with his wife Elizabeth and settled in Clovis, California, where he would set up and run a rather successful landscaping business that made him millions. Which I would say rather successful there is an understatement. However, as opposed to his business, his marriage was not so successful. He and Elizabeth drank and fought a lot. They had 2 kids despite this rocky relationship, John Burgess Jr. and his brother Jimmy. Interviews revealed that Big John was not a good husband nor father, doling out verbal and physical abuse on a regular basis. One witness went as far as to say, quote, "The things he did then, he would be in jail now." He essentially beat his kids into obedience from a young age, instilling a fear-based loyalty in his house. Elizabeth, however, didn't feel that same loyalty. She divorced him in 1973, but ultimately stayed on the property, moving to a trailer behind the house so she could keep an eye on her boys, who were in their early teens. And that didn't last for long, because in July of 1975, Elizabeth disappeared. And 3 days later, 2 of Jimmy's friends found her dead body in a field behind the property. The coroner ruled her death as self-inflicted, saying her blood had a deadly combination of Valium and alcohol, and she eventually choked on her own vomit. Now, John Jr. and Jimmy thought this was suspicious. The coroner reported that her stomach was full of whiskey, and the boys knew she only drank vodka. Moreover, the whiskey bottle was never found. Additionally, Elizabeth had called the authorities days before she went missing, but no one could attest as to why. While it was never proven, the boys always felt like their father had secretly been responsible for their mother's death. So from this point on, John Jr. and Jimmy raised themselves. Their father, Big John, drank and gambled more heavily. He owned a small plane for his landscaping business, and he'd fly that over to the Tahoe area, hit the casino floor, play up to $10,000 a hand in blackjack, lose a ton of money, and then make his way back home. Wealth truly is wasted on the useless. So investigators had motive. They had the white van. The only thing missing from this profile was his bomb-making education. Big John had no formal mechanical, engineering, or verifiable military service, but witnesses noted that he was a craftsman of sorts. If he wasn't gambling, he was in his garage for hours messing around with mechanics. Special Agent Jonke said in an interview from KCRA called Bringing Down the House, the bombing of Harvey's casino, quote, "Once we got the information that John Burgess Sr. was involved, then everything we had in our investigation sort of started falling into place." Just like the ex-girlfriend, Jonke was sure that they had their man. He and another agent would visit Big John's house every day for more than 2 months as part of their investigation. Sometimes Big John would yell and scream profanities at them from the doorway. Other times he would invite them inside for a nice chat. It was in those conversations that he would use very odd and specific language, like, "if I had done this," or "if I had done that." Clearly taking notes from O.J. Simpson, even though this was several years before O.J. Simpson. Jimmy, who was 17 years old at this time, remained loyal to his father, probably from having that loyalty beaten into him as a child. He would do everything he could to protect his father. He knew that their home was bugged, so he would grab the white pages, which for you kids is a phone book, for those of you too young to know, and if you don't know what a phone book is, okay, and would go down the list, line by line, calling every number he could. He made nearly 600 phone calls, forcing the FBI to follow up on every single one. Those poor bastards had to talk to every one of those people, he would say later. Which not only is it tragic that he had this loyalty for a father that didn't deserve it, but also that is insanely clever. To figure out at 17 the FBI's bugged your house so you make a ton of unnecessary phone calls just to tie up their investigation. If John Sr. dedicated a little bit of the time he spent on gambling and killing his wife to raising his family, they probably would have got somewhere. I mean, you know, the sons did get somewhere. I mean, them as like a family unit. You get what I mean. The FBI subpoenaed John Jr. to testify in front of a grand jury. When inquired about why his white van had been in Tahoe and where he was, if not with the van, John claimed he was illegally growing marijuana, which is why he had kept so many details from investigators thus far. But any good pot farmer, and by that I mean amateur botanist, knows you can't grow something like marijuana at 6,000 feet elevation. The FBI arrested John Jr. for lying to a federal grand jury. The feds also charged his brother Jimmy on a lesser charge and brought him in as well, and Big John's sons were interrogated. Though the FBI knew the father was their man, they threatened the sons with the bombing charge. They told the brothers they were looking at a lot of jail time, if not life behind bars, just to take the rap for their old man. But still, tragically, they said nothing. Like a good poker player, the Burgess boys called the FBI's bluff, and they weren't charged. It took almost a year after the bomb went off for investigators to finally pull together enough evidence to obtain a warrant on Big John and make an arrest that would stick. On August 18th, 1981, officials held a news conference at the top floor of the newly reopened Harvey's Resort Hotel and Casino to announce that Big John Burgess Sr. was arrested on 8 counts of his main role in the bomb. He was booked on a Friday and held on a $2 million bail, ensuring he'd have to spend the weekend in jail. 2 co-conspirators were also arrested, along with Big John's girlfriend, Ella Joan Williams. Things became real very quickly for Burgess' sons. Sensing a shift in them, investigators interrogated them using a different tactic. They put the boys in the same room for questioning. As Jonky described the scene, quote, "They looked at each other, and Johnny says, 'I'm ready to tell the truth.' In Jimmy's words, quote, 'My brother John said, F that. What do you want to know? I'm not going to jail for anybody. I'm out.' The boys' attitude shifted completely, and the walls came down. Jimmy reportedly lost it. The interrogation became more of an intense, much-needed therapy session. And amongst all the repressed feelings that poured out came the real story behind the bomb. The boys knew a lot more about it than the FBI gave them credit for, because they were the ones who built it. Once again, every detail about this story. It's something else. The investigator slash therapist discovered that this father had his son so tightly wrapped around his finger, he could get them to do anything. And so when Big John made the decision that Harvey Gross was personally responsible for his gambling debts, he developed plans to make the bomb, ensuring his sons were heavily involved. 1, because he needed help expediting the construction, and 2, if he were to be arrested, he could place the blame on them instead. Oh, I didn't build it. They did. Oh, why do they have a problem with the casino that lost all of my money? That's really a question for them, I think. Not me, the guy that didn't murder his wife. But the first thing Big John needed were explosives. Jimmy had a friend who was working on a big hydroelectric project that required a lot of blasting. So they backed up the van to a locker and, quote, waltzed out with 2,000 pounds of dynamite. It's crazy that even in 1980, no one's keeping track of that. From there, Big John ordered his boys around. Where to screw this, where to hammer that. The boys said that they never actually thought their father would go through with his plan, that it was just another one of his wild tinkering projects to keep him from having idle hands. But the closer the bomb was to being finished, the more they started to believe that their father actually had the guts to do this, and they finished building the bomb on their property in Clovis. But where the boys finally drew a line was in delivering the bomb. Those 2 men in jumpsuits that wheeled the bomb onto the second floor of Harvey's, the same ones who got drunk the night before at the motel, those were not Big John's boys. They were hired henchmen that Big John knew from his previous work. They, along with Big John, rolled down to Tahoe using John Jr.'s white van. Yet another way to pin the bomb on his sons rather than himself if things were to go awry, which they obviously had considering they're all arrested or in interrogation. So, what really happened the morning of the bomb delivery? Well, for starters, the two henchmen had more work to do after the drop. They were also responsible for executing the ransom demand, which it's so funny to imagine two guys, again described as henchmen, being like, yeah, we can drop this bomb off at 9, but I've got to pick up the kids at 1. Then after that, I've got an evening shift over at my part-time job. But as long as a helicopter lands after 10, I should be able to get there. The henchman was, of course, yet again, another instance of Big John keeping his hands clean. The men were also supposed to signal the helicopter that contained the ransom. But as we know, they didn't do that because the helicopter pilot got there and never saw the strobe light to land. It turns out that's because these henchmen forgot the battery for the strobe light, which is why the pilot never saw it and the whole plan fell into disarray, which it's so perfect. This giant bomb, this elaborate series of steps, and you hired guys who didn't put a battery in the flashlight. The story really has it all. You've got like a really evil dude behind the whole thing, but like a series of incompetentness that makes it all fall apart, and then his sons that turn him in, who he abused, and like potentially he killed their mother, so this is him getting vengeance. It's poetic. Big John now had to get involved, and he ran to the nearest Shell gas station to buy a battery, but the attendant wasted John's time with idle chatter and small talk. You know, the kind you would expect from a gas station attendant in any small town. By the time John got the batteries, it was too late, and the helicopter had turned around. Behind the scenes, the chaos continued to unfold. Big John's girlfriend, Joan, was also driving up to help, but she got in a car accident while on the way, ending up in the hospital. When the governor made his plea for more information, Big John was watching the news from Joan's hospital room. This is great. This, like, the FBI was thinking of some criminal mastermind watching from a bunker, like overseeing all this like a puppet master. Meanwhile, someone lost a battery. He gets held up at a gas station. Someone else hits a car. It's unclear if Big John tried to make contact with the FBI or not, but clearly trust was broken between the two parties. And then, of course, the bomb went off, which was not what John had wanted to happen at all, because, you know, he wanted $3 million. The plan was thwarted, and John Burgess Sr. had failed. But Big John thought he was invincible. He didn't relocate to a country without U.S. extradition. After all, his hands were clean. He had delegated and hired help to ensure nothing could be traced back to him. In fact, despite knowing he was being surveilled by the FBI, he was actually starting to build another bomb, planning to use it to extort a bank and to pay a different ransom. I guess they didn't let him gamble there either. But perhaps the senior John's most arrogant belief was that his own boys, his own flesh and blood who he brought into the world, would never turn on him, in spite of all the misdeeds he did against them. During the federal trial, the FBI testified by creating a replica of the bomb, a replica that the two Burgess boys helped them recreate. Using that evidence and the testimony from John Jr. and Jimmy, Big John was convicted in federal court. During the state trial, he chose to represent himself as his own attorney, believing that he could fend off a guilty sentence himself. As if it couldn't get any better, he represented himself. This is great. What's that old saying? He who represents himself has a fool for a client. His first move was to blame the mafia. Okay, see the fool line I just quoted. John claimed he was the fall guy for the local mob's plan to extort money from nearby casinos. He also claimed to the local news that Harvey Gross put him up to this. It was an inside job so that Harvey could remodel the hotel without having to pay for it. Which that would be hilarious if that happened. If a casino owner was like, hey, we're going to blow up part of it, it's going to be a big deal, and then the taxpayers are going to cover the new walls. But most interesting, serving as his own attorney meant John could cross-examine his sons in pretrial hearings, which he would use to grill them for hours. According to Jimmy, quote, John got up to go up on the stand for 3 days and just basically call me a piece of shit all day long. Jimmy would later say in an interview that his father had brainwashed him and his brothers into doing his bidding. In the end, Big John Burgess was convicted on 7 of 8 counts, including federal extortion and several bombing charges. He was put in prison for life without parole, and after 16 years, he died of liver cancer in the Southern Nevada Correctional Center. John Jr. later gave an interview. Having fully broken himself from the spell of his father, he said, quote, an evil man was put in jail. He moved to Nicaragua and would later write a book about the incident called Bombing Harvey. Unfortunately, he took his own life decades later. This incident at State Line, Nevada was monumental for the FBI. After refining what investigators had done there, the stage was set for future evidence gathering techniques that are still being taught and used today. There's even an FBI International Bomb Technician Seminar called Harvey's Havoc. Special Agent Jonke would go on to investigate the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. He and Jimmy Burgess actually maintain a friendly relationship to this day, catching up every once in a while. Harvey's resort and hotel casino fully reopened in May of 1981. During the grand reopening, Harvey remarked, quote, "I know we have the safest hotel in the state of Nevada." As of this posting, that shirt on eBay is still for sale, and a cursory Google search says that it's the only one on the market. So maybe it really is worth the price tag, but it's a pretty big price tag. But if you need to get $3 million quick, I have just the idea. And that is the story of the Harvey casino bombing. See, like, true crime doesn't have to be miserable. It's not only stories of like kids getting hurt or like people getting murdered brutally. Sometimes it's like a jerk who was a jerk to his family and he gets drunk and decides to hold an entire casino hostage with a bomb and everything falls apart on him. Like the bomb itself and the entire team he put together, like just the fact his girlfriend crashed into someone on the way to do it is great. And like everything went wrong for him. And then it's funny. And look, we're not depressed. How we did a true crime video and it's not sad. Isn't that great? I think it's great. And I think you're great for being here. And I just want to say thank you for watching. I apologize for the delay over on Wendigoon lately. I think it's been a couple weeks without an upload. As you can see, I have moved recently, so that took up most of the time in addition to holiday travel and stuff like that. Hopefully we're back on schedule and hopefully you stick around and enjoy what we have coming up. As always, the people that made this video possible will be mentioned in the description. Be sure to show them some love. They did a great job on this one. I mean, they do a great job on all of them. This one was a lot of fun. And I believe that should do it for now, but before I go, we just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Not to mention, he let a guy at the gas station keep him from getting to the airfield with the battery. What could that dude have possibly been telling him that made him stick around? There is no level of chit chat or small talk that would keep me away from a $3 million bomb heist. Maybe it was like that scene from No Country for Old Men where he's on his way to do a killing and the guy's trying to start up small talk and he just starts threatening him from across the counter. Maybe that's why he was late. I don't know.